Hello, friends. In this episode, Cecilia and I continue our discussion on the chapter On the Shelf, which is a really cute chapter from the part 2 of Little Woman, and it has its focus on John's and Meg's married life with children. I thought I would read you a John and Meg comment that was left to my blog. Anon asked, "Hi, what are your thoughts on John and Meg? Of all the Little Woman couples, I see them discussed the least, and I feel like I am the only one who loves that ship the best. Thank you." And here's my answer. I do love John and Meg. Films don't really put that much focus on John and Meg. I feel like they are so focused on romanticizing Jo and Laurie, and then often quite lazily handle Jo and Friedrich, and Amy and Laurie and everything else seems to be overshadowed by that. I think the Vanity Fair chapter captures the way Meg begins to understand character. It kind of parallels to Jo in New York at the symposium. Meg likes to be pampered by these rich girls, but then she also sees that she's more of a toy for them and is there to amuse them. The Vanity Fair leaves sort of a bad taste in her mouth, but it does make her consider what kind of person she wants to be and what qualities she admires. Once they get married, they face the same struggles that a lot of married couples do when adjusting to a new situation. John is the sweetest when he gives up on getting a new coat so that Meg can get a dress, but then she doesn't feel right about it, which is followed by the infamous Little Woman sexy. I need to stop right here. When Cecilia and I were discussing about the chapter On the Shelf, we found another sex scene between John and Meg, and now you can all try to find it. Both John and Friedrich felt that they weren't worthy of these women because they were poor. I think a lot of people mischaracterize Meg as somebody who just wanted to be pretty and rich, and people say the same about Amy. Now, Marches used to be wealthier and Meg remembered how it was, but she was never somebody who was afraid to work. The modern narrative often wants to portray her as the least ambitious housewife. In the 19th century context, that she stayed at home taking care of the kids was pretty normal. You can see their admiration for one another in Camp Lawrence, when John goes defending Meg being a governess. It is a bit sad and weird when people now say that Meg didn't have ambition. Maybe it is a bad reading of the book, or people don't realize that not all ambition needs to be artistic. Because Louisa May Alcott's sister Anna also worked as a teacher, and we know that Meg in the book worked as a governess. Being governess in the 19th century, it was not a very fashionable thing to do. It was something that the lower class women did because they were poor. It was not a respected profession. Female education was still seen as very suspicious. And there were schools for teachers, but women were not always allowed to become teachers and professors. But John obviously admires Meg because they are in the same situation. He is teaching Laurie, who always doesn't have the greatest respect for him, and he is poor and sends money to his family. Meg was a governess, and sometimes the children in the family gave her a hard time as well. She also worked hard, and parts of Meg's salary went to support her family. We cannot really blame Meg for wanting a new dress time to time and seeing all these other girls around her having these luxurious things. It is interesting that both Jo and Meg end up marrying teachers. I think Jo did run the school, but she was more of a mother than a teacher in Plumfield. And she was more than happy to let Friedrich do the teaching. The March family was always very pro-women's education. In Little Men, there is also a scene where Fritz says that he and Laurie would go to John for marital advice, since he was the one who had been married the longest. I can see that scene so clearly in my mind, and I hope you guys enjoy our discussion. And as always, you can find a Little Woman podcast episode transcripts from my Gumroad site at littlewoman.gumroad.com. This is a Little Woman podcast, chapter on the shelf, domestic joy and comfort. Chapter 38, on the shelf. In France, the young girls have a dull time of it till they are married, when Vive la Liberté becomes their motto. In America, as everyone knows, girls early sign a Declaration of Independence and enjoy their freedom with Republican zest, but the young matrons usually abdicate with the first heir to the throne, and go into a seclusion almost as close as French nunnery, though by no means as quiet. Whether they like it or not, they are virtually put upon the shelf as soon as the wedding excitement is over, and most of them might exclaim, as did a very pretty woman the other day, "I am as handsome as ever, but no one takes any notice of me, because I'm married." That's quite funny.
It reminds me of how much Amy has this sort of freedom in France, and it comes across a little bit spicy or scandalous, or she's driving alone, going wherever she wants. There's this contrast. She's an American girl. It's not Emily in Paris. It's Amy in Paris. And then you have Meg at home feeling this way about being put in the shelf. Her freedom days are over. But that's because she doesn't get help. Then she gets help.
And I think she's only 22 at this point.
She's so young.
Or 23. She's very young. At least in our time, this is very young. Not being a belle or even a fashionable lady, Meg did not experience this affliction till her babies were a year old, for in her little world primitive customs prevailed, and she found herself more admired and beloved than ever. After the wedding, she's like, "No one is going to notice me now that I am married, but they will notice me again once that I have babies and I have become a mother." It's a bit sad. But I think this is also reality.
I think I was a bit confused by that line about the primitive custom, about what Lisa meant by that. And the bookends of the chapter are very interesting because they start with this idea, okay, they get married, and then no one notices them anymore. They are on the shelf. It closes with this idea of, well, your house can be your palace, and you can have love and respect and all those things. But the story inside is going in a different direction, I think. With this idea that, okay, let him help you, let Hannah help you. I found that was worth mentioning. I put a bunch of post-its in the book, but to mark the beginning of the chapter. As she was a womanly little woman, the maternal instinct was very strong, and she was entirely absorbed in her children, to the utter exclusion of everything and everybody else. Day and night she brooded over them with tireless devotion and anxiety, leaving John to the tender mercies of the help, for an Irish lady now presided over the kitchen department. Being a domestic man, John decidedly missed the wifely attentions he had been accustomed to receive, but as he adored his babies, he cheerfully relinquished his comfort for a time, supposing with masculine ignorance that these would soon be restored. But 3 months passed, and there was no return of the repose. Meg looked worn and nervous. The babies absorbed every minute of her time. The house was neglected, and Kitty, the cook, contemplated easy, kept him on short commands. When he went out in the morning, he was bewildered by small commissions for the captive mamma. If he came gaily at night, eager to embrace his family, he was paged by a hush. They are just asleep after worrying all day. If he proposed a little amusement at home, no, it would disturb the babies. If he hinted at a lecture or a concert, he was answered with a reproachful look and a decided, "Leave my children for pleasure, never." His sleep was broken by infant wails and visions of a phantom figure pacing noiselessly to and fro in the watches of the night. His meals were interrupted by the frequent flight of the presiding genius, who deserted him, half-held, if a muffled chirp sounded from the nest above, and when he read his paper of an evening, the Miss Colic got into the shipping list, and Daisy's fall affected the price of stocks, for Miss Brooke was uninterested in domestic news. He was trying so hard.
Yes.
Sure, he wasn't, really trying to be at the nursery, but he's like, what if we do that? And no. But I also think that that's part of John being an orphan. He says, everything will go back to normal if I just wait.
Yeah, that is true.
This man doesn't have a mother or sisters. He wasn't raised in a household where he was going to see, no, that's not how rearing children works.
They have this Irish lady as a help with the babies, but I don't know if they mention her name. I don't think it's Kitty.
It says Kitty.
Kitty the cook. Okay, is Kitty the Irish lady? All right.
She takes easy. Easy. It's okay, you can't live off on bread and cheese and ham. Don't ask me more. The poor man was very uncomfortable, for the children had bereft him of his wife. Home was merely a nursery, and the perpetual hushing made him feel like a brutal intruder whenever he entered the sacred presence of Babyland. He bore it very patiently for 6 months, and when no signs of amendment appeared, he did what other paternal exiles do, tried to get a little comfort elsewhere. Scott had married and got to housekeeping not far off, and John fell into the way of running over for an hour or two of an evening, when his own parlor was empty, and his own wife singing lullabies that seemed to have no end. Mrs. Scott was a lively, pretty girl, with nothing to do but to be agreeable, and she performed her mission most successfully. The parlor was always bright and attractive, the chessboard ready, the piano in tune, plenty of gay gossip, and a little supper set forth in tempering style. John would have preferred his own fireside if it had not been so lonely, but as it was, he gratefully took the next best thing and enjoyed his neighbor's society.
This actually reminded me of my big fat Greek wedding part 2, and Tula says that I've been a mother so long I've forgotten how to be a wife.
Yeah, but I think it's a very nice detail that John is going over to Scott's and he's enjoying his time there, but the book makes a special note that he'd rather be in his own house with his own wife. It's not like she's old now and she has some children. I'm no longer interested in Meg or in home, and I'm in love with my friend's wife. There's nothing of that.
No.
It's I'd rather not be here. I'd rather be at home, at my own home with my own wife I love so much, but she's not there, and I won't stay there alone. So the next best thing is being at my friend's house.
Yeah, and Meg, she's really in that baby bubble right now. Baby bubble. And John would like to join her into that bubble, but she doesn't let him in. Yet.
Meg rather approved of the new arrangement at first, and found it a relief to know that John was having a good time, instead of dozing in the parlour or tramping about the house and waking the children. But by and by, when the teething worry was over and the idols went to sleep at proper hours, leaving Mamma to rest, she began to miss John and find her work-basket still company, when he was not sitting opposite in his old dressing gown, comfortably scorching his slippers on the fender. She would not ask him to stay at home, but felt injured because he did not know that she wanted him without being told, entirely forgetting the many evenings he had waited for her in bed. She was nervous and worn out with watching and worrying, and in that unreasonable frame of mind, which the best of mothers occasionally experience when domestic cares oppress them. Want of exercise robs them of cheerfulness, and too much devotion to that idol of American women, the teapot, makes them feel as if they were all nerve and no muscle.
This shows very well how they do have a communication problems, because they both miss each other, but they don't know how to express that, and then they misread each other's behavior.
It's very realistic.
Yes.
Because it's like, you shouldn't know I want it gone. And she's like, well, you kicked him off. You kicked him out. Mostly, he wanted to stay at home. No, she doesn't tell him. I think later on she says that she doesn't want him to think that she's jealous. And that's why she doesn't tell him, but tell him. Like, don't tell him, oh, I don't want you to go to Scott's house. Tell him, I miss you.
Yes.
It's not that hard, but it's also that hard of a thing to say when you have become somewhat distant with someone.
Yes, she would say, looking in the glass, I'm getting old and ugly. John don't find me interesting any longer, so he leaves his faded wife and goes to see his pretty neighbor, who has no encumbrances. Well, the babies love me. They don't care if I am thin and pale and haven't time to crimp my hair. They are my comfort, and someday John will see what I gladly sacrificed for them. Won't he, my precious? To which pathetic appeal Daisy would answer with a coo, or Demi with a crow, and Meg would put by her lamentations for a maternal revel, which suited her solitude for the time being, but the pain increased as politics absorbed John, who was always running over to discuss interesting points with Scott, quite unconscious that Meg missed him. Not a word did she say, however, till her mother found her in tears Monday and insisted on knowing what the matter was, for Meg's drooping spirits had not escaped her observation.
One thing I wanted to mention is that it comes with that imagery of Meg sitting on the drawing room doing her needlework, and John is sitting opposite to her in his dressing gown, with his feet on the fender. It's such a picture of domestic joy and comfort.
Yes.
So much for me, because it's not happening now. So Mommy comes to the rescue. Yay!
I wouldn't tell anyone except you, Mother, but I really do need advice, for if John goes on so much longer, I might as well be widowed, replied Mrs. Brooke, drying her tears on Dais's bib with an injured air. Goes on how, my dear? Asked her mother anxiously. He is away all day, and at night, when I want to see him, he is continually going over to the Scots. It isn't fair that I should have the hardest work and never any amusement. Men are very selfish, even the best of them. So are women. Don't blame John till you see where you are wrong yourself. But it can't be right for him to neglect me. Don't you neglect him. Why, Mother? I thought you'd take my part. So I do as far as sympathizing goes, but I think the fault is yours, Meg. I don't see how. Let me show you. Did John ever neglect you, as you call it, while you made it a point to give him your society of an evening, his only leisure time? No, but I can't do it now, with 2 babies to tend. I think you could, dear, and I think you ought. May I speak quite freely, and will you remember that it's Mother who blames as well as Mother who sympathizes? Indeed I will. Speak to me as if I was little Meg again. I often feel as if I need teaching more than ever, since these babies look to me for everything. I think a lot of people don't pay attention to the fact that the first marriage that is introduced in Little Woman is actually Mrs. March and Mr. March. So these girls, they look up to their parents when it comes to being married. And for the most part, Mr. March and Mrs. March, they have a pretty steady marriage. It's pretty strong.
But you also can tell that, especially in these chapters with Meg, that it was something they built together. Something. It wasn't always like this.
No,
it wasn't at the beginning. It wasn't like this. It's many years. It's over 20 years of working on their marriage to make it work. They were lucky because they are great people, as parents in these books tend to be. But you get this sense that there were things they needed to work out. Marmy is giving her experience, the wisdom that experience gave her.
Yes, and there is a scene earlier in part 2 when Mommy and Jo have their discussion, and Mommy says that Jo should not marry Laurie, in her opinion, because they are too similar, and Jo should marry someone who balances her, the way Mr. March is balancing Marmy. That's one of those things that is not in Little Woman adaptations either, but I think it kind of shows how what you just said, that marriage is a bit of a process, or not just marriage, any romantic relationship is like that. It doesn't matter if you are married or not. It's a build-up. If you want to stay together, you need to constantly make compromises with your partner.
And learn to live with each other. Basically most of it. Meg drew her low chair beside her mother's, and with a little interruption in either lap, the two women rocked and talked loudly together, feeling that the tie of motherhood made them more one than ever. You have only made the mistake that most young wives make, forgotten your duty to your husband in your love for your children. A very natural and forgivable mistake, Meg, but one that had better be remedied before you think to different ways. For children should draw you nearer than ever, not separate you. And if they were all yours, and John had nothing to do but support them. As if they were all yours, and John had nothing to do but support them. I have seen it for some weeks, but have not spoken, feeling sure it would come right in time. I'm afraid it won't. If I ask him to stay, he'll think I'm jealous, and I wouldn't insult him by such idea. He doesn't see that I want him, and I don't know how to tell him without words. Make it so pleasant he won't want to go away. My dear, he's longing for his little home. But it isn't home without you, and you're always in the nursery. Aren't I to be there? Not all the time. Too much confinement makes you nervous, and then you're fitted for everything. Besides, you owe something to John as well as to the babies. Don't neglect husband for children. Don't shut him out of the nursery, but teach him how to help in it. His place is there as well as yours, and the children need him. Let him feel that he has his part to do, and he will do it gladly and faithfully, and it will be better for you all.
Marmy is right.
She's right. And this is the thing we were talking about earlier. That let him help you. These are his children too. He should be there with you. He should be helping you with your children. You are not supposed to do this alone. She even mentions it as part of the things that Meg can do to keep John home. To make home more attractive to him, one of the things is letting him help with the children. Because the children are supposed to make you grow closer together instead of pulling you apart.
Yes. And I think during the Victorian times, it wasn't that usual for men to be part of the family life because it was believed that women were responsible for the domestic world. But then the 19th century, it was a very interesting time because people started to pay a lot more attention to child psychology and child development. Slowly, people realized that it is more important to have more people raising the child than just the mother. So this is a really good look into that time period. And the Alcots were transcendentalists, and they had at the time, their values were considered very, very liberal, very modern, because they had quite different views on lots of things like raising children.
Yes, you can totally see that, especially if you take into account earlier Victorian works that are very known, like the Bronte's novels at the end of the 1840s. And there you can see clearly this idea that children are to be raised by their mothers or their governesses, but that they belong in the world of women, in the part of the house and of the world that belongs to women. And a lot of this time, the presence of the man is seen as, in general, as a disruption of the way things should be. Of course, there are exceptions, and novels like E10 of Whitefell Hall are pushing for this idea of a father that really loves his children, is very involved, and gives them a good example. But not in this way, with this clarity, with this emphasis.
Yes, and during Victorian times, people also saw mothers more like angels. When a woman became a mother, they became almost like sacred people because now they are mothers. And so when Louisa May Alcott, she was a nurse, she was also seen more as an angelic character because when you are a nurse and you take care of other people, you get this sort of a new status as someone with respect, because even if you don't have children and you still have this maternal nature, you are still kind of a mother when you work as a nurse. And I thought that was really interesting. I did my research on the Alcotts, the idea of angelic mother, because I think one of the reasons why Meg doesn't want John to be part of raising these children is based on these ideas of the time that it is her duty as a woman to be this domestic angel.
That gives it a whole other dimension I never considered. That's super interesting.
Maybe it has more of a spiritual or religious idea of that time period, but it makes sense. And I think the transcendentalists, they also believed that when a child was born, the child is flawless and they don't have any sins because they are not corrupted by the world. So children are born as angels. So they had all these kinds of interesting ideas about babies and motherhood.
Demi was definitely not an angel.
No.
Spoilers. Spoiler alert. You really think so, Mother? I know it, Meg, for I have tried it, and I seldom give advice unless I have proved its practicability. When you and Jo were little, I went on just as you are, feeling as if I didn't do my duty unless I devoted myself fully to you. Poor father took to his books after I had refused all offers of help and left me to try my experiment alone. I struggled along as well as I could, but Jo was too much for me. I nearly spoiled her by indulgence. You were poorly, and I worried about you till I fell sick myself. Then father came to the rescue, quietly managed everything, and made himself so helpful that I saw my mistake and never have been able to get on without him since. That is the secret of our home happiness. He does not let business win him from the little cares and duties that affect us all, and I try not to let domestic worries destroy my interest in his pursuits. Each do our part, alone in many things, but at home we work together, always. It is so, mother, and my great wish is to be to my husband and children what you have been to yours. Show me how, I'll do anything you say. You always were my docile daughter. Well, dear, if I were you, I'd let John have more to do with the management of Demi, for the boy needs training, and it's none too soon to begin. Then I do what I have often proposed. Let Hannah come and help you. She's a capital nurse, and you may trust the precious babies to her while you do more housework. You need the exercise. Hannah would enjoy the rest, and John would find his wife again. Go on, keep cheerful as well as busy, for you are the sunshine maker of the family, and if you get this small, there is no fair weather. Then I try to take an interest in whatever John likes. Talk with him, let him read to you, exchange ideas, and help each other in that way. Don't shut yourself up in a bandbox because you're a woman, but understand what is going on and educate yourself to take your part in the world's work, for it all affects you and yours. It's interesting, this idea that, you need to know about politics. You're not supposed to live in a box because this future and this politics affect you and affect all you love. No, it's an approximation of women's civil rights in a way.
Yes, there's more of that in Jo's Boys, but here it begins.
And it's one line. And there's also this element of what we were saying, that that the marriage of Mr. and Mrs. March to work, and how Mommy is talking to Meg about things that are her own experience, things that she has learned herself, and not something that she's parroting because she heard it somewhere else or whatever. And it's the lessons of experience.
I can imagine Jo being too much for her as a child. I think there is even a part in Little Men where Jo speaks about this, how she gave a very hard time to Marmee when she was a child.
She gave a hard time when she was no longer a child.
Yes.
She had this I love the small bits where Jo's fiery temper shows up, like when the whole engagement between John and Meg is about to come to happen. It's in the air, and so Jo shakes her fist to Mr. Bruce's umbrella on the hallway. And it's hilarious, but oh no, this child must have been a handful to deal with when she had far less control of that personality of hers.
Yeah, and we know that Laurie was the same. There would have been a really terrible duo if they would be against you, now that I think about it. And it's so funny that Jo doesn't like John in the beginning because she wants to marry Meg to Laurie. I think it's because she sees John as a stranger and Laurie is like her brother. If Meg would marry someone, she should marry someone Jo knows. So maybe that's why she was quite scared of John in the beginning. But then, as the book progresses, Jo really begins to like John and trusts him.
I think that there's also an element of Jo growing up and Laurie staying mostly a child until later on. Like this says, oh, Meg should marry Laurie, and she tells this to Marmee, and Marmee's like, she's younger than Meg. And Joe's like, no, he's so mature, and Marmee's like, no, he's not. like in a very Marmee way, not trying not to hurt just feelings, but she's like, no. And I feel part of that matchmaking Joe tries to make between Meg and Laurie is precisely about the same thing that Laurie's proposal to Joe becomes later on, keep it inside, keep it in the world of childhood. So, and Joe grows out of that.
Yes.
She matures and she sees, oh no, that was not a good idea. That's not how adult life works at all.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that she grew out of that. Because it would have been terrible if she would have stayed that way. That's really why I really didn't like the 2019 film, because Jo is supposed to mature and be a responsible adult when she is in her 20s. And that Jo wasn't.
The thing to me, the funniest thing to me about that is that by the end of the movie, Jo is a less mature, less impulsed adult than book Jo is on the first chapters.
Yes.
You have this scene that it's very telling that Jo has been on her attic writing for days on end, and Mommy and Hannah have prepared this meal, like a buffet, and downstairs. And so Jo comes downstairs and starts stuffing her face with food, like, no thank you, no how are you, no can I help you? Mommy, no, she came down and ate, like, food, doesn't need preparing, doesn't need nothing. And then Mommy's like, oh, Jo, you have a visitor. And there's like, I know no one. And I was thinking about that scene. I myself did that when I was 14. My mom would have figuratively thrown a shoe my way, Like, you can't do that. Jo is supposed to be 28. For all the movie shows us, she's a freeloader, quote unquote. Yes, to cut arm. She doesn't even thank Mommy or ask if she needs help. No, she comes down and eats the food, talks to no one, answers when she's told she's a visitor. But you go to chapter 1, chapter 2 of the book, and they are all preparing tea for Mommy, and Jo is very actively taking part in that. 16-year-old book Jo is more mature, more helpful, more functional as an adult than 2019 Jo, 28-year-old Jo, 25-year-old Jo.
It was a terrible movie.
I can't believe that. It's such a tone deaf thing. A person who lives or has lived for quite a time a very comfortable life, and doesn't think that today it's hard to do all those things, to do laundry, to cook. It was 10 times harder in the 1860s and 1870s, which makes it even worse that she doesn't help. But there's no awareness.
She behaves more like Laurie, who in the book is privileged and doesn't really do those things. But Jo is not supposed to be like that, because Jo was always self-reliant. She came from a poor home, and even if she did have these moments when she got really angry, there was always a level of respect to her parents. It's interesting to me because a lot of times when Jo is angry in the book, it's really with her relation with Laurie. It's never with Friedrich or with Meg. It's with Laurie and then early on with Amy. But when Amy matures and Jo matures, they don't really argue that much anymore as adults. So it's really about personal relationships.
Fascinated with each other. But mostly we sit on the side of Jo, like the whole charity bazaar thing where Amy helps and she's snapped off by all those Scottish ladies. And Joyce in awe at her ability to cope with it all and to raise above the situation and be a very proper lady. And Joy's like, oh wow. I want to be like you when I grow up. I think it's not in terms of jealousy, of that I will stick to Jo my whole life, because they want different things out of life. But I can see that there's that sort of mutual admiration lurking in part two.
Definitely.
On the surface.
And I think Jo also admired Meg a great deal. And she always admired Beth in a lot of ways because Beth was calm and was able to control her emotions. And I think those were the things that she also admired in Meg as well, and in her mother. And I think there's this quote from Louisa May Alcott where she says that she's a hero worshipper by nature, and I think you can really see that in this book series.
Jo is really this very affectionate, very open, very generous person, and it's so sad those aspects are portrayed or ignored as weaknesses because she's unprocessed and whatever. That's the best thing about Jo.
I agree.
I'm ranting on. John is so sensible. I'm afraid he will think I'm stupid if I ask questions about politics and things. I don't believe he would. Life covers a multitude of sins, and of whom could you ask more freely than of him? Try it, and see if he doesn't find your society far more agreeable than Mrs. Scott suffers. I will, poor John. I'm afraid I have neglected him sadly, but I thought I was right, and he never said anything. He tried not to be selfish, but he has felt rather forlorn, I fancy. It is just the time, Meg, when young married people are apt to grow apart, and the very time when they ought to be most together, for the first tenderness soon wears off, unless care is taken to preserve it, and no time is so beautiful and precious to parents as the first years of the little lives given them to train. Don't let John be a stranger to the babies, for they will do more to keep him safe and happy in this world of trial and temptation than anything else, and through them you will learn to know and love one another as you should. Now, dear, goodbye. Think over Mother's preachment, act upon it if it seems good, and God bless you all. Meg did think it over, found it good, and acted upon it, though the first attempt was not made exactly as she planned to have it. Of course the children tyrannized over her, and ruled the house as soon as they found out that kicking and squalling brought them whatever they wanted. Mamma was an abject slave to their caprices. But Papa was not so easily subjugated, and occasionally afflicted his tender spouse by an attempt at paternal discipline with his obstreperous son, for they inherited a trifle of his sire's firmness of character. We won't call it obstinacy. And when he made up his little mind to have or do anything, all the king's horses and all the king's men could not change that pertinacious little mind. Mamma thought the dear young to be taught to conquer his prejudices, but Papa believed that it never was too soon to learn obedience. So Master Demi eagerly discovered that when he undertook to wrestle with his papa, he always got the worst of it. Yet, like the Englishman, Baby respected the man who conquered him, and laughed the father whose raving no was more impressive than all Mamma's love puns. I love that bit. It's like, we will call it the strength of character. We won't call it obstinacy.
But this is very true because children, they respect more those people who put boundaries to them than the ones who don't.
It's really, it depends child to child. Some children do very well with a lot of nurturing, what we all do well with a lot of nurturing, but different types of it. Like, I think even with Demi and Daisy, Daisy says that Daisy was doing okay. She was a little bit of a tyrant, but she was doing okay with Meg's care. But Demi needed something different. Demi was testing the limits of his own environment and needed someone to put boundaries for him to learn that there were boundaries. I think that's also very special, this idea that not every child is the same. And some children need some things and other children need other things.
It's kind of a bit like with Franz and Emil. You get the sense that Franz is a very easy child, but then with Emil, Jo and Fredrik had to put a bit more work because he's described to be very restless, and that's why he became a sailor.
We won't start talking about little Menno's voice. We'll get carried away. A few days after the talk with her mother, Meg resolved to try a social evening with John. So she ordered a nice supper, set the bar in order, dressed herself prettily, and put the children to bed early, that nothing should interfere with her experiment. But unfortunately, David's most uncomparable prejudice was against going to bed, and that night he decided to go on a rampage. So poor Meg sang and rocked, told stories, and tried every sleep-provoking while she could devise, but in vain. The big eyes wouldn't shut, and long after Daisy had gone to lie low, like the chubby little bunch of good nature she was, naughty Demi lay staring at the light, with the most discouragingly wide-awake expression of countenance. Will Davy lie still like a good boy while Mama runs down and gives poor Papa his ticket? Asked Meg as the hall door softly closed, and the well-known step went tiptoeing into the dining room. "Be hasty," said Davy, preparing to join in the revel. "No, but I'll save you some little cakes for breakfast if you go bye-bye like Daisy. We've got Daffy?" "Yes." And Davy shut his eyes tight, as if to catch sleep and hurry the desired day. Here, there's this difference I was mentioning between Daisy and Demi. Daisy went to sleep very easily, and Demi needed to be blackmailed, mostly, bribed into going to bed.
Relatable, I believe, for parents everywhere.
So this is the fact that Jack hasn't forgotten all the chiding and hashing. He's getting in, tiptoeing to the dining room. Taking advantage of the propitious moment, Meg slipped away and ran down to greet her husband with a smiling face and the little blue bow in her hair which was his special admiration. He saw it at once and said with pleased surprise, "Why, little mother, how gay we are tonight! Do we expect company?" "Only you, dear." "Is it a birthday, anniversary, or anything?" "No, I'm tired of being a dowdy, so I dressed up as change. You always make yourself nice for table, no matter how tired you are. So why shouldn't I when I have the time?" "I'll do it out of respect to you, my dear," said old-fashioned John. "Ditto, Mr. Brooke," laughed Meg, looking young and pretty again, as she nodded to him over the teapot. "Well, it's altogether delightful, and like old time. This taste is bright. I drink to your health, dear." And John sipped his tea with an air of reposeful grandeur, which was of very short duration, however, for as he put down his cup, the door handle rattled mysteriously, and the little voice was heard, saying impatiently,
That was our chat today. Cecilia and I will continue our discussion next time. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices. Bye.